So there's a version of Batman that doesn't get as much widespread attention, but is actually one of the most unique takes on the character. And this is in reference to Gotham by Gaslight, which is a reimagined version of Bruce Wayne during the late 1800s and an overall Victorian era style. And in this video, I wanted to cover why this concept from both the 1989 novel and the 2018 animated movie would be perfect source materials for a live action film. And I really think that this would also be a great opportunity to make an adaptation that sides a little bit more in the historical fiction genre. So to really get started, I just wanted to give a little bit more background on this story. So we of course have Gotham by Gaslight being the first Elseworlds project published by DC Comics with the 1989 graphic novel. And you have the Victorian era being in reference to the reign of Queen Victoria and the overall cultural style of this time period. And to specify, this would still be Gotham in the US. You do have several East Coast cities in the US being pretty much a heavy reflection of British styles despite America's independence. And for both the novel and animated movie, you have the same premise of Batman going after Jack the Ripper, since he was actually a real serial killer in London in 1888. So you have a lot of his characteristics and details in the story being pretty accurate to what he did in real life, such as his use of a knife and sending letters to the police, which makes him an excellent fit for a detective story, especially since he was never caught. But between the animated movie and the graphic novel, you have some pretty drastic differences in the reveal of who Jack the Ripper is, but I didn't want to spoil either of those. However, I will say that I really like the book version a little bit better, so I really think that would be the best source material to base the plot off of for a live action adaptation here. Although I also think you could even come up with a potentially new twist for who Jack the Ripper is in this universe for a live action adaptation as well. Another thing I think would be neat to see in live action for this version of Batman would be how he would operate during a time like this. He obviously wouldn't have nearly the same access to high-tech gadgets, an advanced computer, cameras, or satellites. So it would be interesting seeing him a lot closer to Sherlock Holmes in this iteration. And even beyond the previous two versions, I think it would be neat to see a design of the Batmobile for this time period. And this could really be based on some of the first cars. This, along with the aesthetics of Wayne Manor, the Batcave, or even just everyday life in Gotham, I think could really add to the cinematography of what this could offer. And I really think the gold here would be seeing a lot of these foggy, dark scenes of Gotham at night. Another thing I think would be interesting in live action would be to explore some of the historical context of this time period. The movie and the graphic novel take place around the late 1880s to the early 1890s, so it could be neat to see the aftermath of the Civil War in America. Or a similar idea would be, since the Civil War also takes place during the Victorian era, you could also just move the story back a decade or two to have the Civil War being an ongoing event during the time of this story. So I think it would be really interesting to see how Batman would have gotten involved in that. And I think this would be a great opportunity to tie in Alfred's reference in Batman Begins, where he mentions the foundation of Wayne Manor being used by the Wayne family as one of the underground railroads for fleeing slaves. So I think even instead of making this an alternate reality where Bruce Wayne is born in this time period, you could even make this a distant ancestor to Bruce Wayne, such as the story focusing on his great-great-grandfather, who also became a version of Batman. So I think this could be the perfect opportunity to tie in that reference. But if you are going to go the same exact year, pretty much, such as the animated movie taking place in 1891, that's also when you have an increase of immigration in America from Southern and Eastern Europe, in addition to the largest mass lynching event in history of Italian Americans. So I think instances like this of xenophobia could also be good historical context for the time and could also be a side plot that Batman gets involved with. And other plot details from the original works that I think could be good additions here still would be the Chicago World Fair in 1893, as we also see this in the animated movie. And what's interesting here is you also have heavy inspiration from the murders of H.H. Holmes during this World Fair, as he murdered several women during this time period. And this was also what the inspiration was used for the killer in the animated film, besides the real Jack the Reaper as well. But really looking at all of this, I think you have a lot of historical events that could really add to the historical nature of this potential live action adaptation. And I even think if you just started with something as simple as a cameo of this version of Batman, maybe something like what you saw with Deadpool and Wolverine, where you got different cameos or alternate versions of the Wolverine when Deadpool is time traveling. I think that could be something neat if you maybe do that with a DC universe in the future in live action, to really kind of just tease this and then even develop it as a separate spin-off project going forward. Or I even think this idea is something neat for any time period. Whether it was Batman, you even have the fan film imagining the X-Men during the Viking era, and I really think that that is all interesting. So feel free to let me know your thoughts on this, whether it's Gotham by Gaslight or maybe even a different era you'd be interested to see Batman get adapted to. And I'll see you later.